your random name tag? Where's your friend Carl? Oh my.
We've traditionally used nurse crops. And first of all, what is a nurse crop? So your fore crop was something planted beforehand, terminated, and then you plant your next crop. And we don't use it for a harvestable item. It's just put back into the soil to improve soil life. Okay. The nurse crop concept is it's planted the same time, and it essentially nurses the economic crop along. So where we historically did a lot of nurse crop was in the forage world, which is the forte of King's AgriSeeds, of where we started in the industry, in the forages. So for example, we would take a spring oat, which you plant a spring crop, it just grows straight up and keeps on going and makes seed, and in about 90 days or so you have a seed, a grain. Okay? But the way we use it is a nurse crop with alfalfa, clovers, grass, perennial grasses. We have the nurse crop growing with it because it grows faster than our perennials. It chokes the weeds out, and in our first cut, before it gets too aggressive and starts choking our economic crop to a competition, we take it for harvest, we cut it, and then it's essentially done. I had the privilege to watch these plots change over time, and they changed substantially. There's some things that I thought in the beginning, wow, that's really going great. And then all of a sudden, the other ones kind of go a bit better than it. So you really don't know for sure which one's the best until the game's over. So I noticed that the wheat was a little shorter than the rye. So that's kind of odd. Must be the allelopathy. So nurse crops might give allelopathy, but when we let the small grains get big, they definitely do. So we don't have much experience with that. Bottom line, it died off, and then these crops keep on growing. So it caught up, and end result, if I have better weed control and I get about the same results, I'm happy. I don't know how it's going to yield out at this point. So that's the pretty cool thing about the nurse crops. We planted same day, 1 inch deep, nurse crops going this direction. Right after that, we planted our different genetics going across that way. 1 inch with the nurse crops, ½ inch with the hemp genetics. And it's really cool to watch things pop. The nurse crops and the hemp, I say the hemp came up slightly earlier. The hemp was there. You saw some good hemp coming up in this plot. I think it was 3 or 4 days. I've seen hemp come up as fast as 2 days. That's just the leaders, and the just two work well together. So, and we had this tilled, so if we would have a hard rainfall, the nurse crop's going to prevent the erosion. The other thing you'll notice is in these tall varieties, there's virtually nothing underneath as far as weeds go. And notice as we get shorter and shorter, more weeds. We have less plants, a shorter crop, more weeds due to sunlight getting in. So, but if you're doing for grain, we're doing a grain harvest, well, I'd rather go through a short crop and not have as much fiber going through my combine. On this one here, maybe we can consider this a grain and fiber crop. It's possible to put your header about this high or so, depending on where the majority of the seed is from here up. run this across, collect the grain, and depending on if the end market accepts it for fiber, I could come and cut that low and then bale the whole thing up. Now, from a soil stewardship perspective, as soon as we do that, we want to get something else in there.
No, I'm actually like the third station. Just walk around, just keep walking around and running.
Jeff, you lost your name. By the way,
Crop is a crop that is intentionally planted in advance of the economic crop. What we learned in 2021 was that timing matters. We planted in late summer, early fall, and then again in the spring, because farmers can't always get a crop in after their last harvest, say in late October or November. So we planted a fore crop in March. What we learned last year was that the spring crop seemed to serve to suppress weeds for a little bit, but it didn't have much effect on the hemp that we grew last year. The crop, the difference between August planting or late summer and early fall, the late summer fore crops, and we did 15 of them, five in late summer, that gave us on average about a 24% boost in yield. The crop in early fall boosted our yield about 35%. What we have found is that with wheat tends to inhibit hemp. Kind of overall, it tends to inhibit hemp. Allelopathy is a chemical property. It happens in the soil where certain plants, like cereal rye, will actually inhibit weed growth in the crop that follows. So that's why everybody plants cereal rye. It's very inexpensive, it's easy to come by, and it does a really good job for weed suppression. When it comes to hemp, it's fairly neutral, neither negative nor positive. But when you can plant something that will boost your yield by 24 or 35%, why would you do it?
What about something like just straight white clover or something?
We did not plant white clover because when you terminate a crop, it's done. And white clover takes longer to germinate than rye or wheat or any of our. These are all really pretty quickly germinating crops. And by the time clover would germinate in the spring in our area, the weeds would just win the battle. They would win the race. So clover, we have vetch in our mixtures as a component for fixation. So we use vetch in a lot of our mixes to fix nitrogen.
What kind of vetch?
Hairy vetch.
Hairy vetch.
Sorry, I should specify that because crown vetch is a noxious that's on the list. Don't plant. Here. Come down here, I want to show you something because we planted over corn. We're trying to also figure out what kind of rotations do we need to have in our field. So we planted after a fallow corn year, and we planted May the 12th, and by about June the 5th or so, we were seeing herbicide injury with the hemp that was planted after our corn crop. And the herbicide we would have used was
Atrazine and metolachlor.
atrazine and metolachlor. So we have determined that, and you can actually see it. You see where the plants are yellow? They're maturing early. They were stressed at the beginning, and yes, part of this is it's on the edge, so that could be a factor. But when a crop is set back, and it was set back, it had an umbrella effect. It was yellow in the middle and green on the edges. So the plants were physically shorter than the other crops in the block. So a setback at the beginning is a setback throughout. So when people say it'll grow out of it, it will. It'll turn green. but you cannot make up for lost time like that with a young crop. Now moving on to our control. Here you can see some difference in the wheat growth that's here. The crop is getting taller. Part of that is competition. I want you to step this way and see what you notice as you move towards the center.
This is all the same variety, the whole way going across.
This is indigo right here, going across. Yes, so the four crops, think of it like flag. The four crops run this way, the varieties run this way. So you see the difference down here? Keep going. On the ground, any observations?
Getting more density here.
With
Wheat.
weeds. We didn't know this until we had a drone fly over, but we did what's called a nurse crop. A nurse crop is planted at the same time as your economic crop, and the purpose of the nurse crop is to help that young seedling get established. We planted wheat on this side of the field, going that direction, and we planted rye on this side of the field, going that direction. And there's about a 4-foot gap in the middle where we didn't plant anything. When the drone flew over and took this footage, I talked about the bread loaf effect. Over there on the edge, it kind of mounds up and kind of gets shorter. When we saw the drone footage, there's a gap right here in the middle. So we have that bread loaf effect in the middle of the field. What is that about? What we surmise is that when the hemp grows and the grassy rye and wheat come up, it's actually a healthy competition, and the hemp stretches and competes with that rye and with the wheat. So the same thing, an early disadvantage is in effect all the way through the crop, an early advantage is helpful to the crop. So management, thinking about the previous crop history from 2021 or 2022 for your 23 crop, also what you do at the same time.
Just to add on, the beauty of planting winter wheat and winter rye in the spring is they don't go reproductive. They'll come out, they'll be vegetative state, and then it gets too hot, it's too humid, and then they die. And there's your beautiful hemp field with some weed suppression, because that wheat was there in the beginning when those cool season annual weeds come up, and then they're gone.
So these grass type plants, wheat and rye, germinate quickly, about the same time as the hemp. That means they germinate faster than some of those other weeds, and they outcompete the weeds, which weed control is when you get hemp off to a good start, the first 3 weeks are the critical piece. Weed has that allelopathic effect. We actually have a negative effect on the hemp from the wheat that was planted in the fall. Wheat plus small box booster mix, we have about, I did some stand counts. In a half meter, I have about 45 plants per square foot on average in a half square meter, with anything with wheat in it. And with corn, I have about 40 plants per square meter. With Kozak oats, I have 55 plants per square meter.
So winter wheat in the fall before hemp, bad. Winter wheat as a nurse crop with hemp, good.
That is exactly right. So now farmers are calling me and they're saying, Sarah, I don't have good stand. It could be rain. It could be planting depth. I have talked to farmers who I say, what is that gauge right there? Oh, that's a depth meter. It's planted at 2 inches. Well, that's not about the variety then. Could it be the field conditions before planted into corn, or have some other residual herbicide activity? or is it because of a crop rotation? So I don't have a decision tree for when to replant, but we're going to have to develop that as we go. Because some crops are like, do I till it and start over, or do I let it go and try to manage the weeds?
Would something like alfalfa work with you?
I don't know about alfalfa. Some farmers have tried alfalfa, and I will say this: if the field has been managed well for weeds, it's more likely. But if it's been a pasture, or if it hasn't been, renovated recently, there's probably a big bank of weed seeds there.
I was thinking more of the nutritional drain on the soil, for the same crop a couple years in a row.
Well, in the fall, Cody, if you could speak to this, we corrected for the nutrients that we took off when we harvested
do a
the
soil
field.
test and replace what you took out. Okay.
And so what was here last year?
In this field, I believe it was in the spring was oats, followed by I believe it was just a summer annual mix of millet and sorghum that we cut down and let fat.
So when Cody and Tracy took that crop off, I'm really stretching here, but we know about how much nutrients those crops consume during the growing season. And so we don't take soil tests every year, but we do know that if sorghum takes off X amount of potassium, we will add back X amount of potassium in order to bring up our fields to what would be normal. And then we'll start again. So the fertilizer that I applied to this whole block was just elemental nitrogen at the rate of 185 pounds per acre. And that was spread granular at the time of planting. What we did when we managed the field initially is, and this is a common organic approach, is we terminated the field, yes, with glyphosate and some other media burn down. And you would not do that, of course. But when you terminate a crop, we tilled it in. You're killing off what is there, but you're also stirring up weed seeds. And those weed seeds are stimulated to grow. We wanted to allow about 10 days or so, depending on the weather, to have that weed flush. And then we went back through again and mechanically killed those weeds now twice. We wanted to do that a third time, do a third tillage pass in order to drop that bank of weed seeds. They germinated, we killed them, we germinated, they killed them, they germinated, we killed them a third time, just to deplete the bank. Because farming is what it is, we took a look at our planting window and said, the soil's right, we've got rain in the forecast, this is our week to plant. So we only got 2 tillage passes in. But the better that you, and you know this from anything, the better you manage your weeds from year to year, the less weed pressure you have over time.
Yeah. Every year I try to get him to give a recommendation, and every year he says, "Oh, I'm not ready to give a recommendation."